The ballpoint pen trembled in Elena Vasquez's hand as she scrawled the words on the back of the receipt. The ink smeared where her palm had sweated through the thin paper. She had maybe 30 seconds before the blonde woman at table 12 looked up from her phone. "Don't drink the wine. Your girlfriend is texting the hitman outside." 14 words. 14 words that would change everything. Elena folded the receipt and slipped it inside the leather check presenter, her fingers leaving damp prints on the soft material. Her heart hammered so loudly she was certain the entire restaurant could hear it. The couples murmuring over candlelit dinners, the sommelier describing a Bordeaux to the table by the window, the busboy clearing plates with practiced efficiency. None of them knew. None of them could see what she had seen. She crossed the restaurant floor, weaving between tables with the muscle memory of 3 years working at Lucia's. The kind of upscale Italian establishment where a single entree cost more than her weekly grocery budget. The kind of place where men in hand-tailored suits conducted business over ossobuco and women wore diamonds that could pay off her student loans twice over. The kind of place where a 26-year-old waitress from East LA had no business getting involved in whatever was happening at table 12. But here she was, walking toward the man she'd been warned never to approach. The man the manager had specifically told the staff to leave alone unless summoned. Marcus Vance sat with his back to the wall. She'd noticed that detail earlier, the way predators always positioned themselves with a clear view of every exit. His black suit jacket hung open, revealing a crisp white shirt and what might have been the edge of a shoulder holster. A compass tattoo marked the side of his neck, the kind of intricate work that must have taken hours in the chair. His dark hair was swept back, and when he'd ordered earlier, a Barolo, the good one, the $400 bottle, his voice had been quiet but carried the weight of someone accustomed to being obeyed. He wasn't looking at Elena now. He was looking at the woman across from him. Victoria, she'd heard him call her, with an expression that could almost be mistaken for tenderness. The way his eyes softened when she laughed, the way he reached across the table to touch her hand. He had no idea. Victoria Hale was beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful. Blonde hair that caught the candlelight like spun gold, a red dress that probably cost more than Elena's car, cheekbones that could cut glass. She smiled at Marcus with cherry-red lips, while her other hand, hidden beneath the white tablecloth, typed furiously on her phone. Elena had seen the messages. She hadn't meant to. God, she hadn't meant to. 45 minutes earlier, Elena had been restocking napkins in the supply closet when Victoria had slipped into the women's restroom adjacent to her hiding spot. The walls in this old building were thin, a detail the owners overlooked because the clientele paid for ambiance, not acoustic privacy. "He just poured the second glass," Victoria had said into her phone, her voice carrying through the shared wall. "The Rohypnol should start working in about 15 minutes, maybe 20, depending on how much he drinks." Elena had frozen, her hand suspended over a stack of cloth napkins. When you see him start to slur, that's your cue. Come in through the kitchen entrance. I already unlocked it during my bathroom break. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Take his watch, his wallet, whatever. Just make sure it doesn't look personal. A pause. Elena hadn't breathed. "No, I can't do it myself. I need to be the grieving girlfriend, remember? The one who tried to save him but couldn't." Another pause. "The cartel is paying you enough to do this clean. Don't screw it up." The call had ended. The bathroom door had opened and closed, and Elena had stood in the supply closet, napkins clutched to her chest, trying to remember how to make her lungs work. She could call the police. That was the obvious choice, the smart choice, the choice any rational person would make. But Elena had grown up in East LA. She knew how long it took for cops to respond to a 911 call from her neighborhood, if they responded at all. She knew that by the time she finished explaining to some skeptical dispatcher what she'd overheard through a bathroom wall, Marcus Vance would already be dead. She could walk away, clock out early, claim a headache, disappear into the night. Whatever happened at table 12 wasn't her problem. She didn't know this man. She didn't owe him anything. But she could still hear Victoria's voice in her head. Make it look like a robbery gone wrong. Just make sure it doesn't look personal. Elena had watched enough true crime documentaries to know what happened to witnesses. She'd also watched enough of them to know that some choices defined who you were. Whether you wanted them to or not, she'd chosen. Now she was 3 steps from table 12, the check presenter clutched in her sweating hands, about to hand a warning note to a man who was almost certainly connected to organized crime. Congratulations, Elena, she thought. You finally lost your mind. Your check, sir? She said, placing the leather folder beside Marcus Vance's untouched wine glass. He didn't look at her. His eyes remained on Victoria, who was saying something about a trip to Napa they should take next month. We didn't ask for the check, Victoria said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as she glanced at Elena. There was something cold in that look, something that made Elena's skin prickle with warning. Compliments of the house, ma'am. The manager wanted to thank you for your patronage. The lie came out smoothly, one of the few benefits of 3 years in food service. Marcus finally turned his attention to the check presenter. His hand reached for it casually, the gesture of a man who never looked at bills before signing them. Elena held her breath. His fingers opened the leather folder. His eyes dropped to the receipt tucked inside. She watched his face. For a fraction of a second, so brief she might have imagined it, something flickered in his dark eyes. Recognition, calculation, the swift, terrible intelligence of a man who had survived in a world where trust meant death. Then his expression smoothed back to pleasant neutrality. Victoria, he said, his voice carrying that same quiet weight as before. Would you excuse me for a moment? I need to make a call. Victoria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Now? We haven't even finished our wine. It's business, you know how it is. He stood, buttoning his jacket with one hand. The other, Elena noticed, had closed around the receipt. I'll just be a minute. He walked past Elena without looking at her. But as he passed, so close she could smell his cologne. Something expensive, woodsy, with an undertone of leather. She heard him murmur a single word. Kitchen. Then he was gone, disappearing through the swinging door that led to the back of the restaurant. Elena stood frozen, the empty check presenter still in her hands. Victoria was watching her with narrowed eyes, the smile completely gone now. Is there something else? Victoria asked, her voice sharp enough to cut. No, ma'am. Enjoy your evening. Elena turned and walked away on legs that didn't feel like they belonged to her. She could feel Victoria's stare on her back like a target painted between her shoulder blades. She should run. She should grab her purse from the break room and run out the back and keep running until she hit the Pacific Ocean. Instead, she walked toward the kitchen. The kitchen of Lucia's was controlled chaos, flames leaping from stovetops, the percussion of knives against cutting boards, the symphony of shouted orders in a mixture of English, Spanish, and Italian. Elena had spent hundreds of hours in this space, navigating the narrow passages between prep stations, ducking under serving trays, timing her movements to the rhythm of the dinner rush. Tonight, none of it registered. She pushed through the swinging door and nearly collided with Santiago, the head chef, who was plating a delicate arrangement of seared scallops. Elena, watch where you're. Sorry. She sidestepped him, her eyes scanning the kitchen. Marcus Vance stood by the back door, the one that opened into the alley where they kept the dumpsters. He was holding his phone to his ear, speaking in rapid, clipped sentences that she couldn't quite hear over the kitchen noise. When he saw her, he ended the call. You have 30 seconds to explain, he said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were not. They were the eyes of a man who had seen violence and dealt it out and knew exactly how to do both efficiently. Who sent you? No one sent me. Elena's voice came out steadier than she felt. I heard her, in the bathroom. She was on the phone with someone about drugging your wine and you decided to warn me. It wasn't a question. Yes. Why? The question hit her like a punch to the chest. Why had she? This man could be a murderer, a drug dealer, a human trafficker, any one of 100 terrible things that would make his death a service to society. Because I couldn't just watch someone die, she said finally. Not when I could stop it. Marcus studied her for a long moment. In the harsh fluorescent light of the kitchen, she could see the faint scar that traced his jawline, the premature lines at the corners of his eyes, the weight he carried in his shoulders. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. "No." "Good." He glanced at his phone, then at the back door. "We have about 3 minutes before she realizes something is wrong and signals her people. When that happens, they're going to come through the front door shooting." Elena's stomach dropped. "Shooting?" "There are 7 other diners in that restaurant right now, plus your staff, maybe 15 people total." His voice remained steady, factual, as if he were discussing the weather. When the cartel sends a hit squad, they don't typically worry about collateral damage. The kitchen noise seemed to fade into the background. All Elena could hear was her own heartbeat, too fast, too loud. "Then we have to warn them. We have to. There's no time." Marcus moved toward the back door. "The only way those people survive is if we're not here when the shooters arrive. If they come in looking for me and find me gone, they'll leave. But if I'm still here—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. "Follow me," he said. "Unless you'd rather stay and explain to the Cartel del Golfo how you ruined their assassination attempt." Elena thought of her mother in Boyle Heights, working double shifts at the hospital. Her younger brother Miguel, finally doing well in community college. Her grandmother's rosary that she kept in her purse for luck. She thought of the blonde woman in the red dress, typing on her phone beneath the tablecloth. She followed Marcus Vance out the back door. The alley was dark, lit only by a single flickering light above the kitchen entrance. The smell of garbage from the dumpsters mixed with the October chill in the air. Elena shivered in her thin uniform, a white button-down and black slacks that offered no protection against the cold or anything else. A black sedan idled at the mouth of the alley, headlights off. As they approached, the driver's door opened and a man emerged, tall, bald, built like a linebacker. His eyes swept the alley with professional efficiency before settling on Elena. "Boss?" His voice was a deep rumble. "She's coming with us, Leon." Marcus opened the back door. "Get in." Elena hesitated. Once she got in that car, there was no going back. No calling the police, no returning to her apartment, no pretending this night had never happened. From inside the restaurant, she heard shouting, then glass breaking. "Now would be good," Marcus said. Elena got in the car. Leon was already behind the wheel, throwing the sedan into reverse as Elena scrambled for her seatbelt. The car shot backward out of the alley, tires squealing as it turned onto the street. Through the rear window, Elena saw 3 men in dark clothing running out of Lucia's kitchen door. One of them raised something that glinted in the streetlight. "Down!" Marcus shoved her head below the window line, just as the back windshield exploded in a shower of glass. The car accelerated. More gunshots. Something pinged off the door panel, inches from Elena's head. She could feel the shards of glass in her hair, the cold wind rushing through the shattered window. Leon drove like a man possessed, taking corners at 50 miles per hour, running red lights, weaving through traffic with the precision of someone who had done this many times before. Elena stayed down, her cheek pressed against the leather seat, Marcus's hand still on the back of her head. She could hear him on his phone again. His voice controlled but urgent. It was Victoria. "Yes, I'm certain. No, she had backup. Cartel, by the looks of them. We need the safe house, the one on the waterfront." The car made a hard left turn that sent Elena sliding across the seat. "And Thomas? Find out how they knew where I'd be tonight." Someone talked. Another turn, the sound of sirens in the distance getting closer. "Handle it." He ended the call. For a long moment, there was only the sound of the engine and the wind through the broken window. "You can sit up now," Marcus said. Elena pushed herself upright. Her hands were shaking. Her whole body was shaking. Glass glittered in her hair and on her clothes like macabre confetti. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked. His voice had changed, still controlled, but something softer around the edges. "I don't think so." She looked down at her trembling hands. "What just happened?" "My girlfriend of 3 years just tried to have me killed." He said it the same way someone might say it looks like rain tonight. "The woman I was planning to propose to next month decided working with a Mexican cartel was more profitable than staying with me. I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate, absurd even, but they were all she had. Marcus made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Don't be. She was right about one thing. I'm not an easy man to love." He turned to look at her, his dark eyes unreadable in the passing streetlights. But you knew nothing about me. I could be anyone. I probably am exactly the kind of person you shouldn't be helping. And you warned me anyway. Elena thought about all the responses she could give. The truth, that she'd acted on instinct, that she'd made a choice she couldn't explain even to herself. The lie, that she was braver or better or more certain than she felt. I couldn't watch someone die, she said again. It was all she had. Marcus studied her for another long moment. Then he nodded, once as if she'd passed some kind of test. Leon, he said, we're going to warehouse 17. Boss. Leon's acknowledgement was brief. The car changed direction, and Elena realized with a clarity that felt like falling that she had just stepped into a world from which there might be no return. The port of Long Beach spread out beneath the gray pre-dawn sky like a mechanical forest. Shipping containers stacked in endless rows, cranes reaching skyward like prehistoric beasts, the distant rumble of cargo ships and diesel engines. Elena had driven past this place 100 times on her way to nowhere in particular, but she had never been inside the maze of warehouses that lined the waterfront. Warehouse 17 sat at the end of a pier, separated from its neighbors by a stretch of cracked asphalt and chain-link fence. From the outside it looked abandoned, rust streaks on the corrugated metal walls, a loading dock that hadn't seen a truck in years, weeds pushing through the concrete. But when Leon punched a code into a hidden panel beside the side entrance, the door opened onto something entirely different. The interior had been transformed into a command center. Computer monitors lining one wall, communication equipment blinking with green lights, a map of Los Angeles covered in pins and strings like something from a police procedural. Two men in dark clothing looked up as they entered, their hands moving toward holsters before they recognized Marcus. Boss. We heard about Lucia's. One of them, young, with a shaved head and tattoos covering both arms, stepped forward. Is it true about Victoria? It's true, Dmitri. Marcus shrugged off his jacket, revealing the shoulder holster Elena had suspected earlier. A matte black pistol sat snugly against his ribs. Get Rodriguez on the line. I want to know how the cartel got our schedule. Already working on it, boss. Marcus turned to Elena, who stood frozen just inside the doorway. In the harsh industrial lighting, she became acutely aware of how out of place she looked. Still in her waitress uniform, glass in her hair, mascara probably smeared from when she'd rubbed her eyes in the car. Leon, Marcus said, set her up in room 4. Food, water, clean clothes if we have them. And then she stays there until I figure out what to do with her. Elena's heart stuttered. What do you mean, what to do with me? Marcus walked toward her, stopping close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. Up close, she could see the flecks of gold in his dark irises, the small cut on his chin from what might have been a close shave that morning. You saved my life tonight, he said quietly. I'm not going to hurt you, but you're also the only witness to what happened at Lucia's. The police will be looking for you. The cartel will be looking for you. And there are people in my organization who will want to know why a random waitress decided to intervene in a hit. I'm not with anyone. I already told you. I know what you told me. His voice gentled, just slightly. And I believe you. But belief isn't enough in my world. I need proof. I need time to verify who you are and make sure you're not a plant. A plant? You think someone sent me to what? Warn you about your own assassination as some kind of elaborate trick? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Stranger things have happened. Elena wanted to argue. She wanted to demand that he let her go, call a cab, return to her normal life of double shifts and student loans and texting her mother good morning every day. But she looked at the armed men behind him, at the equipment on the walls, at the world she had fallen into through nothing more than a thin bathroom wall and 14 words on a receipt. How long? She asked. A few days. A week at most. And if I say no? Marcus's expression didn't change. Then I drive you to the nearest bus station and wish you luck. But Elena, he said her name for the first time, and the sound of it on his lips did something strange to her chest. The moment you walk out that door, you're on your own. I can't protect you from the cartel. I can't protect you from the police. I can't protect you from whatever falls out from tonight. But if I stay? If you stay, you're under my protection until this is over. No one touches you. No one threatens you. Whatever happens, I give you my word. You'll walk out of this alive. His word. The word of a man she'd known for less than 2 hours. A man who was almost certainly a criminal, probably dangerous, possibly everything her mother had ever warned her about. But his eyes, when they met hers, held something she hadn't expected. Honesty. Or at least a convincing imitation of it. Fine, Elena said. A week. Marcus nodded. Some of the tension left his shoulders. Leon, room 4. And just like that, Elena's new life began. Room 4 was actually a small apartment carved out of the corner of the warehouse. A bed, a bathroom, a tiny kitchenette. The walls were concrete, but someone had hung curtains over the single window, and the bed had clean sheets that smelled like detergent. Elena sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at her phone. No signal. Of course there was no signal. She was in a warehouse in the middle of a shipping yard, surrounded by armed men who worked for someone named Marcus Vance. Marcus Vance. She turned the name over in her mind like a stone in her hand. It meant nothing to her. But the way Leon and Dmitri had looked at him, the way they jumped to follow his orders. Whoever Marcus was, he wasn't just some low-level criminal. There was a knock at the door. Before she could respond, it opened. A woman entered, older, maybe 50, with gray-streaked dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and a face that had seen things Elena couldn't imagine. She carried a tray with food, sandwiches, fruit, a bottle of water, and a pile of folded clothing. "I'm Rosa," the woman said, setting the tray on the small table by the window. "I've worked for the Vance family for 30 years. Mr. Marcus asked me to make sure you're comfortable." "The Vance family?" Elena echoed. Rosa's expression flickered, something between pity and warning. "You don't know who he is?" "Should I?" The older woman was quiet for a moment. Then she sat down in the room's only chair, her hands folded in her lap. "Marcus Vance runs the West Coast operations for one of the most powerful organizations in the country. His father built the empire. His older brother was supposed to inherit it, but he was killed 6 years ago, shot dead in his own driveway by a rival family." Elena's mouth went dry. Marcus didn't want this life. He was going to be a lawyer, if you can believe it, had a full scholarship to Stanford Law. But when his brother died, his father needed someone to step up. Marcus stepped. "So he's, what, a mob boss?" Rosa's lips thinned. "We don't use that word. But yes, he controls shipping routes, logistics, distribution. He has politicians in his pocket and judges on his payroll. He's also responsible for more charitable donations to this city than any other private individual. Homeless shelters, youth programs, hospitals." "How generous of him," Elena said flatly. Rosa's eyes met hers, and Elena saw something unexpected there. Not anger, but understanding. "I know what you're thinking. What I thought too when I first started working for the Vances. How can someone be both things, the criminal and the philanthropist, the killer and the kind man?" She paused. "But I've watched Marcus grow up. I've seen him carry the weight of his family's legacy on shoulders that never asked for it. He's done terrible things. He'll do more terrible things before this is over. But he's also the man who paid for my daughter's college when my husband got sick. The man who made sure every child in Watts got presents last Christmas." "Why are you telling me this?" Rosa stood, smoothing her skirt. "Because you saved his life tonight. And because I saw the way he looked at you when he brought you in. He hasn't looked at anyone like that in a long time." "Like what?" But Rosa just shook her head and moved toward the door. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." She left. The lock clicked behind her. Elena stared at the closed door for a long time. Then she picked up one of the sandwiches, suddenly ravenous, and began to eat. Outside the small window, the first gray light of dawn was beginning to streak across the sky. The days in Warehouse 17 took on a strange rhythm. Elena woke each morning to Rosa's knock. Breakfast, clean clothes, the occasional book or magazine that someone had thought to provide. She spent her time reading, pacing the small room, doing push-ups and sit-ups to burn off nervous energy. 3 times a day, Leon or Dmitri would escort her to the warehouse's common area for meals, where she ate in silence while armed men talked in hushed voices around her. Marcus was rarely there. She caught glimpses of him, on the phone, hunched over a computer, conferring with men whose names she didn't know. He looked different from that first night at Lucia's. The elegant suit had been replaced by dark jeans and a black t-shirt, and the tenderness she'd seen him show Victoria was nowhere in evidence. He looked like what he was, a man at war. On the third night, he came to her room. Elena was sitting on the bed, reading a dog-eared copy of The Count of Monte Cristo that Rosa had found somewhere, when she heard the knock. Different from Rosa's, firmer, more decisive. "Come in," she said. Marcus entered, closing the door behind him. He looked tired. The stubble on his jaw had grown into something approaching a beard, and the lines around his eyes seemed deeper than before. "We verified your story," he said without preamble. "Elena Vasquez, 26, born in Boyle Heights, mother's a nurse at County General, father's been out of the picture since you were 7. You've worked at Lucia's for 3 years, never had so much as a parking ticket. You ran a background check on me. I ran 17 different background checks on you, talked to your neighbors, your co-workers, your landlord, even managed to get your high school transcripts. And you're exactly who you said you were." He moved to the chair Rosa had sat in 3 days before. A woman who heard something she shouldn't have and decided to do the right thing. "Is that so unusual?" Marcus considered the question. "In my experience, yes, it's extremely unusual. Most people look the other way. Self-preservation is a powerful instinct. Maybe I'm just an idiot. Maybe." A hint of that ghost smile she'd seen before. "Or maybe you're something else entirely." He was quiet for a moment, and Elena found herself studying his face the way she might study a complicated piece of art, looking for meaning in the shadows, in the planes of his cheekbones, in the way the light caught the stubble on his jaw. "Can I ask you something?" she said finally. "You can ask. I might not answer." "Victoria, how long were you together?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. His expression flickered, pain, quickly controlled. 3 years. I met her at a charity gala. Her father was a businessman, or so I thought. Turned out he was running money for the cartel. I found out too late, after I'd already eliminated him. Elena's breath caught. "You killed her father?" "He was embezzling from my organization, feeding information to our enemies. By our rules, by any rules, the punishment was death." Marcus's voice was flat, reciting facts. "I didn't know about Victoria until later. I didn't know she'd spent 3 years planning her revenge." "And you never suspected?" "I suspected everyone, but Victoria was." He paused, searching for the word. "Convincing. She made me believe she loved me. She was very good at making people believe things." The bitterness in his voice was barely concealed. "I'm sorry," Elena said. "Why do you keep saying that?" "Because someone should." She set the book down. "Because even people who do terrible things can be hurt by the people they trust. That's not me excusing anything you've done. I don't know what you've done. But pain is pain." Marcus stared at her. In the dim light of her small room, he looked younger somehow, more vulnerable. "Do you know what my father said when I told him about Victoria? When I told him I wanted to marry her?" He didn't wait for her answer. "He said I was a fool. He said men in our position don't get to have love. We get alliances, arrangements, strategic partnerships. He said that any woman who chose to be with me was either stupid or dangerous, and I should figure out which before it was too late." He sounds like a difficult man. He was. He died 2 years ago. Heart attack. He spent his whole life building an empire and died before he could see it fall apart. "Is it falling apart?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," he said finally. "The cartel has been circling for years, waiting for weakness. Victoria was supposed to be their way in, get close to me, learn our operations, then eliminate me and create chaos. Without me, my people would fight over control. The organization would fracture, and the cartel would swoop in to pick up the pieces. But she failed. Because of you." His eyes met hers, and the intensity in them made her heart stutter. "Because a waitress with nothing to gain and everything to lose decided to write 14 words on the back of a receipt." Elena didn't know what to say to that. The weight of his gaze felt like a physical thing, pressing against her chest. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now I finish what they started. Victoria's still out there, along with her cartel contacts. They'll try again. They have to. If they back down now, they look weak. And weakness in this world means death. So it's kill or be killed. Something like that." He stood, and Elena felt the absence of his presence like a sudden chill. "I have a meeting tomorrow," he said. "With Victoria. She reached out, wants to negotiate." "You're going to meet the woman who tried to kill you?" "I'm going to meet the woman who failed to kill me. There's a difference." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Elena, I've been thinking about what you asked, why I didn't just let you go that first night." "I didn't ask that. But you wondered." He turned to look at her. "The truth is, I could have dropped you at any bus station in the city. You would have survived, probably. The cartel would have eventually lost interest. The police would have moved on to other cases. Your life would have gone back to normal." "Then why didn't you?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "Because when you looked at me in that kitchen, you didn't flinch. Everyone flinches, Elena. Everyone who knows who I am, who knows what I've done. They all have that moment, that hesitation. But you," he shook his head, "you looked at me like I was just a man, like what I was didn't matter, only what I was about to do. What you were about to do was decide whether to trust a complete stranger. Yes, and I did." He opened the door. "Sleep well, Elena. Tomorrow, everything changes." He left. The lock didn't click this time. Elena sat on the bed, her heart hammering, the book forgotten in her lap. Tomorrow, everything changes. She had no idea how right he would be. The call came at 4 a.m. Elena was half asleep when she heard the commotion in the main warehouse. Raised voices, running footsteps, the clatter of equipment being moved. She dressed quickly in the jeans and sweatshirt Rosa had provided and pressed her ear to the door. Leon's voice urgent. They found her apartment. Turned the whole place upside down. Another voice she didn't recognize. How did they ID her so fast? Restaurant cameras. Someone on the inside must have pulled the footage before the cops got there. The door opened so suddenly that Elena stumbled forward. Leon caught her arm, steadying her. "You need to come with me," he said. Now. The main warehouse was in chaos. Men moved with purpose, loading weapons into cases, stuffing files into shredders, wiping down computer equipment. Marcus stood in the center of it all, a phone pressed to his ear, his face carved from stone. When he saw Elena, he ended the call. "They know who you are," he said without preamble. "The cartel has your name, your address, your family. They're offering $100,000 to anyone who brings you in." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "My mother. I've already sent people. She's being moved to a safe location as we speak." Marcus's voice was clipped, efficient. "Your brother too. They'll be protected until this is over." "You can't just, they have lives, jobs." "They have lives because I'm choosing to protect them. The alternative is waiting for the cartel to use them as leverage against you, against me." His jaw tightened. "Trust me when I say, you don't want to know what that would look like." Elena wanted to argue. She wanted to scream. She wanted to wake up and discover that this whole week had been nothing but a fever dream, brought on by bad shellfish. Instead, she forced herself to breathe. "What do we do now?" "Now we move. This location is compromised. Too many people knew about it. We're relocating to a secondary site in San Pedro." Marcus glanced at Leon. "Get her in the car. We leave in 5 minutes." "Wait." Elena caught his arm before he could walk away. "The meeting with Victoria, is that still happening?" Marcus looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then up at her face. Something unreadable passed through his eyes. "Yes, but the circumstances have changed." "Changed how?" "Victoria isn't working alone anymore. She's been in contact with someone else. Someone inside my organization, someone close to me. A traitor. A pragmatist." The word dripped with bitter irony. "Someone who decided that the cartel's money was worth more than my trust." "Do you know who?" "I have suspicions. Tomorrow, I'll know for certain." He gently removed her hand from his arm, but he didn't let go. His fingers wrapped around hers for just a moment. Warm, solid, grounding. "Whatever happens," he said quietly, "stay close to Leon. He'll keep you safe." Then he was gone, swallowed by the chaos of the evacuation. Elena stood in the middle of the warehouse, her hand still warm where he'd touched it, and wondered when exactly she'd stopped being afraid of Marcus Vance and started being afraid for him. The safe house in San Pedro was smaller than the warehouse, a nondescript building that looked like every other industrial property on the block. Inside, though, it was fully equipped. Computers, communications gear, enough weapons to arm a small country. Elena was given a room on the second floor, smaller than her previous quarters, but with a window that overlooked the harbor. She stood there as the sun rose, watching container ships move across the gray water like massive mechanical whales. "You're up early." She turned. A woman stood in the doorway, tall, black, with close-cropped hair and the bearing of someone who had spent time in uniform. She wore a tailored suit that somehow managed to be both professional and tactical. "I couldn't sleep," Elena said. "Who are you?" "Detective Diane Santos, LAPD." The woman stepped into the room, her eyes sweeping the space with practiced efficiency. "And you're Elena Vasquez, the waitress who's been keeping some very interesting company." Elena's heart stuttered. "How did you find you? I've been tracking Marcus Vance for 7 years. You think a building swap in the middle of the night would throw me off?" Detective Santos almost smiled. "Don't worry, I'm not here to arrest you, not yet anyway." "Then why are you here?" "Because I want to understand something." The detective moved to the window, standing beside Elena as they both looked out at the harbor. "I've seen a lot of people get caught up in Marcus Vance's orbit. Most of them end up dead, in prison, or running for the rest of their lives. But you?" She turned to study Elena's face. "You warned him, you saved his life, and instead of walking away when you had the chance, you stayed. He offered me protection. He offered you an excuse to stay." Detective Santos's gaze was uncomfortably perceptive. "There's a difference." Elena didn't have an answer to that. "Here's what I know," the detective continued. "Victoria Hale is working with the Cartel del Golfo. They want to take over Vance's operations, shipping routes, distribution networks, laundering infrastructure. It would give them a foothold on the West Coast that they've been trying to establish for years. So arrest them." "With what evidence?" "Victoria's smart. She's kept herself clean enough that I can't touch her. And the cartel operates across international borders, which means jurisdictional nightmares that would take years to untangle." Detective Santos shook her head. "No, the only way to stop this is to let it play out. Let Marcus and Victoria have their confrontation. Let the bodies fall where they may. And then maybe, just maybe, I can build a case from the wreckage." "That sounds like you're willing to let people die." "I'm a realist." The detective's voice hardened. "Marcus Vance is a criminal. Victoria Hale is a murderer. The cartel kills hundreds of people every year. My job is to protect innocent citizens, not to save criminals from each other." "So why are you here talking to me?" Detective Santos was quiet for a moment. "Because in 7 years of watching Marcus Vance, you're the first truly innocent person I've seen him try to protect. He could have let you go. He could have dealt with you to prevent you from becoming a liability. Instead, he brought you into his inner circle and assigned his best man to keep you safe." She paused. "That tells me something about him, something I didn't expect." "What does it tell you?" "That maybe there's a person underneath all that crime and violence, a person who still remembers what it means to do the right thing." The detective headed toward the door. "The meeting with Victoria is happening tonight. I'll be watching from a distance. Try not to get killed. I have questions I'd like to ask you when this is over." She left without waiting for a response. Elena stood at the window for a long time after that, watching the ships move across the water and thinking about persons underneath, about right things, about the man who had held her hand and told her to stay close, about the meeting that would happen tonight, and what it might cost. The beach at Malibu was empty at 5 a.m. Elena watched from the car as Marcus walked alone across the sand toward the figure waiting near the water's edge. Victoria Hale stood with her back to the ocean, the wind catching her blonde hair and whipping it around her face like a golden halo. "I should be out there," Elena murmured. "No," Leon's voice was flat, final. "You stay here, no matter what happens. But if something goes wrong, I put this car in reverse and we're gone. Boss's orders." Elena gripped the door handle, her knuckles white. On the beach, Marcus and Victoria faced each other. Even from this distance, Elena could read the tension in their bodies, his coiled and ready, hers deceptively relaxed. They were talking, but the wind carried their words away. She wished she could hear them. She wished she could understand what could possibly be said between two people who had once planned a future together and now planned each other's destruction. The conversation lasted 10 minutes. then 20. The sky began to lighten from black to gray, the first hints of orange appearing on the horizon. At some point, Victoria reached into her pocket. "Gun," Elena said sharply. But Leon was already moving, his hand on his own weapon. Victoria pulled out a phone. She showed Marcus the screen, said something that made his whole body go rigid. Then she turned and walked away, disappearing down the beach toward a parking lot hidden behind the dunes. Marcus didn't move. He stood there as the sun crept above the horizon, turning the ocean to gold, casting his shadow long and dark across the sand. When he finally returned to the car, his face was unreadable. "Drive," he said to Leon. "Boss, drive, now." Leon drove. They were halfway back to San Pedro before Marcus spoke again. It wasn't just the cartel. His voice was hollow, scraped raw. It was Thomas. Leon's hands tightened on the wheel. "Thomas Reyes? Your second-in-command Thomas?" "The same." Marcus laughed, a terrible broken sound. 15 years. He's been with me for 15 years, before my father died, before my brother was killed, before any of this. Why? Money. Power. The cartel offered him everything I couldn't, or wouldn't. A seat at a bigger table. Marcus stared out the window at the passing landscape. Victoria showed me the evidence. Recordings, documents, bank transfers. Thomas has been feeding them information for 18 months. He's the reason they knew about Lucia's. He's the reason they found Elena's apartment so fast. Elena felt sick. "What are you gonna do?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quiet. "Victoria offered me a deal. Walk away, leave the country, sign over control of the organization to Thomas, and the cartel promises to leave my people alone." He paused. "She said it was the only way I survived this. And you believe her?" "I believe she believes it." Marcus turned to look at Elena, and for the first time since the beach, she saw something besides emptiness in his eyes. "But here's the thing. She also gave me something else. Information about the cartel's next shipment, enough to cripple their West Coast operations for years." "Why would she do that?" "Because she doesn't want me dead anymore. She wants me destroyed, broken, humiliated, running for the rest of my life." Something dark flickered across his face. "But I'm not going to run." Leon glanced in the rearview mirror. "Boss, if Thomas is compromised, I know." Marcus's jaw set. "We have 12 hours before the meeting he doesn't know I know about. 12 hours to decide whether I use Victoria's information to fight or to negotiate." "Negotiate with who?" Marcus turned back to the window. "With Detective Santos." The meeting happened in a coffee shop in Culver City, neutral territory that neither the cartel nor the police typically frequented. Elena sat in a booth near the back, a cold cup of coffee in front of her, watching Marcus and Detective Santos talk in low voices at a corner table. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could read their body language. Santos was skeptical, arms crossed, leaning back. Marcus was controlled, deliberate, making his case with the precision of the lawyer he'd almost become. The conversation lasted an hour. When Marcus returned to Elena's booth, his face showed nothing. But his hands, when he reached for her untouched coffee, trembled slightly. "Well?" Elena asked. "She'll do it." He took a sip of the cold coffee, grimaced, set it down. "She'll use the information about the cartel shipment to justify a raid. With luck, she'll catch enough high-level operatives to disrupt their operations for years." "And Thomas?" "Thomas will be at the meeting tonight, expecting to take control of my organization." Marcus's voice hardened. "Instead, he'll be walking into a room full of federal agents. You're turning over your own man to the police. I'm turning over a traitor who tried to have me killed." He met her eyes. "There's a difference." Elena thought about that, about the lines Marcus drew in his mind, the distinctions between acceptable violence and betrayal, between criminal enterprise and personal loyalty. "What happens to you?" she asked. "After all this?" "Santos agreed to give me 72 hours to disappear. No pursuit, no warrants. In exchange, I give her everything I have on the cartel's West Coast contacts." He paused. "After that, I don't know. Start over somewhere. Find out if there's anything left of me worth saving." "And your organization? Your people?" "Leon takes over. He's earned it, and he's smart enough to keep things running without making the mistakes I made." Marcus looked down at the table. "Maybe without me, they can be something better. Something that doesn't end in violence." Elena wanted to say something, anything, that would make this moment less heavy. but the words wouldn't come. "What about me?" she finally asked. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "You have a choice," he said at last. "You can stay in Los Angeles, go back to your life. I've arranged for your family to be relocated back to their homes once the threat is neutralized. Detective Santos will make sure the police don't pursue you as a witness. Or, he hesitated, or you come with me." Elena's heart stopped. "Come with you? Where?" "I don't know yet. Somewhere far from here. Somewhere I can figure out who I am when I'm not Marcus Vance, head of the Vance organization." He looked up, and his eyes held something she'd never seen there before. Uncertainty, vulnerability, hope. "I'm not asking you to be with me. I'm not asking for anything except company. Someone who sees me as something other than what I've been." "Marcus, you don't have to answer now." He stood, dropping a bill on the table. "Tonight, everything changes. If I survive it, if this works, I'll find you tomorrow, and you can tell me then." He walked away, out the coffee shop door, into the bright California sunshine. Elena sat alone in the booth, her heart racing, her mind spinning. She thought about her mother, about her brother, about the life she'd built from nothing in a city that had tried so hard to break her. She thought about Marcus Vance, the criminal, the killer, the man who read philosophy at 3 a.m. and cooked pasta for his crew, the man who had saved her family without being asked, the man who looked at her like she was the first person in years to see him clearly. She thought about choice, about the moment in the bathroom at Lucia's when she'd decided to intervene, about every moment since that had led her here. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Mija, are you okay? Haven't heard from you in days. The men who moved us say we're safe, but I'm worried about you." Elena stared at the message for a long time. Her mother didn't know the half of it, couldn't know. How do you explain to the woman who raised you that you've fallen into orbit around a man who commands armies and orders deaths? How do you tell her that the same man makes you feel safer than you've ever felt? "I'm okay, Mama," she typed back. "I'll call you soon. I promise." She thought about the life waiting for her if she walked away. The small apartment in Echo Park, the double shifts at whatever restaurant would hire her now, the slow grind of student loans and bus schedules and grocery lists. It was a good life, or it could be a normal life. But normal felt like a foreign country now, a place she'd once lived but could never return to. The waitress, young, probably working her way through school just like Elena had been, came by to refill her coffee. "Can I get you anything else?" Elena looked up at her, saw herself from a week ago, tired, hopeful, completely unaware of the world that existed just beneath the surface of ordinary life. "No," she said. "Thank you." Tomorrow she would have to answer. Tonight, there was still the meeting. Still Thomas. Still the cartel. Still everything that could go wrong. Elena finished her cold coffee and waited for the world to change. The hours crawled by. Elena returned to the safe house, where Rosa fed her dinner and Leon ran through tactical scenarios with a restless energy that betrayed his anxiety. Marcus was somewhere else, preparing, planning, doing whatever it was that men like him did before walking into danger. At 10 p.m., he appeared in the doorway of her room. "You should sleep," he said. "I can't." He nodded like he understood. He probably did. "When I was 19, he said, leaning against the doorframe, "my father took me on my first job, a negotiation with a rival family in Oakland. I was so nervous I threw up in the bathroom before we went in." Elena almost smiled. "That's hard to imagine. You seem so controlled." "That came later. After I realized that fear doesn't help anything. You feel it, you acknowledge it, and then you set it aside." "Is that what you're doing now? Setting aside your fear?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. "No," he admitted. "Right now I'm terrified. Thomas was like a brother to me, and in a few hours I'm either going to watch him get arrested or—" He stopped. Or things go wrong and I watch him die, or I die, or both." He met her eyes. "This is the part they don't tell you about in the movies, Elena. The waiting, the knowing that everything can change in a moment and you have no control over which way it goes." Elena stood and walked toward him. Stopped close enough to reach out, but didn't. "I used to think I understood risk," she said. "Working late shifts in neighborhoods where you don't walk alone. Riding the bus with men who look at you like you're not a person. That kind of risk." She paused. But this is different. This is choosing to stand next to the fire. You can still walk away. I know. Then why don't you? The question hung between them. Elena thought about all the answers she could give. The practical ones about safety and protection, the romantic ones about connection and chemistry. Instead, she told him the truth. Because you're the first person who ever looked at me like I mattered, she said. Not my job, not my usefulness, not what I could do for you. Just me, the person underneath. Marcus's expression shifted. Something cracked in the controlled facade, a flash of something raw and vulnerable that made Elena's breath catch. I spent 20 years building walls, he said quietly, learning how to keep people out, how to be the thing they expected instead of the person I actually was. He reached out and touched her cheek. Just a brush of fingertips, light as a breath. And then you walked up to my table with a receipt, and every wall came down. Is that a good thing? I don't know yet. His hand dropped. Ask me tomorrow. He left. Elena stood in the doorway for a long time, her cheek still warm where he'd touched it. Tomorrow felt like a lifetime away. The warehouse in Inglewood had seen better days. The building squatted at the end of a dead-end street, surrounded by chain-link fence and the carcasses of abandoned cars. Graffiti covered the lower walls. Gang tags, declarations of love, names of the dead. The windows that hadn't been boarded up were broken, gaping like empty eye sockets in the dim light. Elena stood in the shadow of a rusted shipping container, watching the building from a distance of 300 yards. She wasn't supposed to be here. Marcus had explicitly told her to stay at the safe house with Rosa. But something had pulled her here tonight, some instinct she couldn't name. Or maybe she just couldn't stand waiting anymore. The cab she'd taken had dropped her 3 blocks away, the driver eyeing her with concern that she'd ignored. Now she crouched in the darkness, her phone clutched in her hand, watching for any sign of movement. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Thomas would arrive at the warehouse expecting to meet with cartel representatives. Instead, he would find Marcus, alone, apparently vulnerable. The moment Thomas revealed the full extent of his betrayal, federal agents hidden throughout the building would move in. No violence, no bloodshed, just the clean, surgical removal of a traitor. That was the theory, anyway. Elena watched as cars began to arrive. Dark sedans with tinted windows, the kind of vehicles that announce their occupant's profession without saying a word. She counted 6 vehicles, maybe 20 men total. That seemed like a lot for a simple handoff. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Something was wrong. She could feel it, that same instinct that had saved Marcus in the restaurant, screaming now with renewed urgency. Her phone buzzed. A text from Leon. Something's wrong. Thomas brought back up. Get out of there. Before she could move, the warehouse doors exploded outward. Gunfire erupted. Automatic weapons, the kind that turned walls into Swiss cheese and bodies into memories. Elena dropped behind the shipping container, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Through the chaos, she heard shouting, Marcus's voice, giving orders. More gunfire. The screech of tires. Then, silence. Elena stayed frozen behind the container for what felt like hours. In reality, it was probably 3 minutes. When she finally gathered the courage to peer around the edge, the warehouse parking lot looked like a war zone. Shattered glass, abandoned vehicles, dark stains on the concrete that she refused to examine too closely. No bodies, no survivors in sight. She was pulling out her phone to call Leon when a hand grabbed her from behind. Elena screamed, twisted, drove her elbow back. It's me. Marcus's voice strained. It's me, stop. She spun around. Marcus stood behind her, his white shirt stained dark, his face pale in the dim light. He was leaning heavily against the container, one hand pressed to his side. You're hurt. Thomas brought the cartel's best men, changed the deal at the last minute. Marcus's laugh was wet, pained. Fortunately for me, Detective Santos had backup plans for her backup plans. Where is he? Thomas? Dead. The word dropped like a stone. He pulled a gun. Santos's people had no choice. Elena looked at Marcus, really looked at him. The blood seeping through his fingers, the gray tinge to his skin, the way his legs seemed barely able to hold him up. We need to get you to a hospital. Can't. Cartel will have people watching every emergency room in the city. Then we go somewhere else. There has to be, Elena. He caught her hand with his bloody one. Listen to me. Santos got what she needed. The cartel's West Coast operation is finished. She has enough evidence to bring down a dozen high-level operatives. Thomas's men will scatter now that he's dead. It's over. It's not over. You're bleeding out in a parking lot. I have a doctor. Off the grid. Leon's on his way. He squeezed her hand, but I need to know. I need to know before. He swayed. Elena caught him, her arms wrapping around his waist to hold him upright. Before what? She whispered. Before I pass out from blood loss and can't hear your answer. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Terrible timing. Story of my life. Elena looked at this man, this criminal, this killer, this complicated, broken, trying to be better human being. He was bleeding in her arms, literally, and still asking her about tomorrow. She thought about the receipt, 14 words on the back of a scrap of paper. A decision made in 30 seconds that had changed everything. She thought about choice. Ask me again, she said. What? Ask me what you asked in the coffee shop. Ask me again. Marcus's eyes found hers. Even now, even pale and shaking and probably going into shock, his gaze was clear. Will you come with me? He asked. Wherever I go, whatever I become, will you give me a chance to be someone new? Elena leaned in and pressed her forehead to his. Yes, she said, but you have to promise me something first. Anything. You have to survive the night. Marcus laughed, that same wet, pained sound as before, and then Leon's car was screeching into the parking lot, and everything became motion and urgency and the desperate, hopeful act of keeping someone alive. 6 months later. The hospital in San Diego was small, a nonprofit clinic that served mostly agricultural workers and their families. The building had once been a community center, converted decades ago when the town realized it needed medical care more than bingo nights. The walls still held traces of that former life. A faded mural of children playing in one hallway, bulletin boards that had once announced potlucks and fundraisers. Elena had found her way there through a nursing program that didn't ask too many questions about her past, just whether she could do the work. She could. She did. The transition hadn't been easy. Learning to be a nurse after years of being a waitress required rewiring her brain. The same attention to detail, the same ability to read people, but with stakes infinitely higher. She'd spent her first month terrified of making a mistake that would cost someone their life. But gradually the fear had faded. She discovered she had a gift for this work, for soothing frightened patients, for noticing the small signs that something was wrong before it became critical, for holding hands and offering comfort in the darkest hours of the night. Tonight had been a long shift. 3 births, 2 accidents, 1 elderly farmer who'd had a heart attack while driving his tractor. Elena had held Mrs. Hernandez's hand during her labor, talked her through the contractions in Spanish, felt the triumph when the baby emerged healthy and screaming. She'd cleaned and bandaged the wounds of teenage brothers who'd crashed their motorcycle on a country road. She'd worked alongside the doctor as they fought to save Mr. Chen's life, and she'd felt the quiet victory when his heartbeat stabilized. This was what she'd been missing, she realized. All those years carrying plates and smiling at customers who barely saw her, she'd been searching for something that mattered, something that left a mark on the world. Now she had it. Elena was exhausted, her feet aching, her mind fuzzy with the particular tiredness that came from 12 hours of caring for strangers. But beneath the exhaustion was something else, a quiet satisfaction that warmed her from the inside. She walked out the back entrance into the parking lot, fumbling in her purse for her car keys. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of jasmine from somewhere nearby. Above her, stars scattered across the sky like spilled salt on a dark table. He was leaning against her car. Hey! Elena's heart stopped, then started again faster than before. Marcus looked different. 6 months of healing had done him good. The gauntness was gone, replaced by something healthier. He'd let his beard grow in properly, and it suited him. Made him look older somehow and gentler. His clothes were simpler now. Jeans, a gray Henley, work boots that looked like they'd actually seen work. The compass tattoo was still visible on his neck. Some things didn't change. Hey yourself. Elena stopped a few feet away, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. You're not supposed to be here. I'm not supposed to be a lot of places. That ghost smile, the one she'd missed more than she'd admitted. Thought I'd take a chance. Detective Santos keeps her promises. My 72 hours turned into 6 months of looking the other way. Marcus straightened, his hands going into his pockets. Turns out she was serious about building a case from the wreckage. The cartel's been decimated. Victoria's in federal custody, cutting deals to save herself and the Vance organization. Leon's running it. Better than I ever did, apparently. He's gone legit. Shipping and logistics, nothing illegal. Told me the profit margins aren't as good, but he sleeps better. Marcus shrugged. I couldn't have done that. Too much history. Elena moved closer. Close enough to see the new lines around his eyes, the new gray in his hair. Close enough to smell him, soap and coffee and something that was just him, underneath everything. You didn't call, she said. 6 months, and you didn't call. I wanted to, every day. His voice was quiet. But I needed to know I could do this, be someone else, build something that wasn't built on blood. And? Can you? Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was worn at the edges, creased from being opened and closed 100 times. Elena recognized it immediately, the receipt from Lucia's. 14 words in smeared ink. I've read this every morning since that night, Marcus said. Reminded myself that someone saw something worth saving. Someone I didn't know, who owed me nothing, who could have walked away. Marcus. I'm not who I was. He stepped closer, close enough that she could have touched him if she reached out. I'm not sure who I am yet, but I know who I want to be. I know who I want to be with while I figure it out. Elena looked at the receipt, at the man holding it, at the 6 months of silence that had felt like 6 years, and the simple truth that she'd been waiting for this moment without knowing it. She reached out and took the receipt from his hands. This is mine, she said. You can keep the memory, but the paper belongs to me. Something like hope flickered in his eyes. Does that mean? It means I'm tired and I need dinner, and you're going to cook for me. You promised me pasta once. Time to deliver. The smile that broke across Marcus's face was nothing like the ghost smile she remembered. This one was full, unguarded, almost young. Yes, ma'am. 2 years later, the farmhouse sat on 40 acres of Oregon countryside, green hills rolling down to a river that sparkled in the summer sun. Elena had fallen in love with it the moment they'd seen it, and Marcus had signed the papers before she'd finished walking through the second bedroom. You don't have to decide anything yet, he'd said. But I thought, someday, if we wanted. She'd kissed him quiet before he could finish the sentence. Now she stood on the porch, watching the sun set over the hills, a cup of tea warming her hands. Behind her, Marcus was in the kitchen, doing something complicated with vegetables and a sauce that smelled like heaven. He cooked every night. She'd learned that about him. Learned that he found peace in the measured work of chopping and stirring and tasting. The philosopher's books still lined his shelves, but now they shared space with cookbooks and farming manuals and the mystery novels she'd gotten him hooked on. A car turned onto their long driveway, kicking up dust. Elena tensed for a moment, old habits, but relaxed when she recognized Leon's distinctive truck. He'd visited 3 times now. Each time he brought news from Los Angeles. The organization was thriving, the legal operations were expanding, nobody had come looking for Marcus in over a year. Each time, Marcus listened, nodded, said good and thank you and I'm glad. And each time after Leon left, he'd stand on this porch with Elena and watch the sun set, his arm around her shoulders, his breathing slow and even. Happy? She'd asked him once. I don't know if I'm capable of happy, he'd replied, but I'm content, peaceful, present. He'd turned to look at her. Is that enough? For now, she'd kissed his cheek. We'll work on happy. Tonight Leon wasn't alone. A woman Elena didn't recognize sat in the passenger seat. Young, pretty, with curly dark hair and a shy smile. This is Maria, Leon said after introductions. She's a teacher. 1st grade. Marcus raised an eyebrow. A teacher? Yeah, well. Leon shrugged, something almost bashful in his expression. You said someone once showed you it was possible to be different. I figured maybe I'd try the same thing. Elena watched them walk toward the house. Leon and Maria, Marcus holding the door. Everyone laughing at something she couldn't hear from the porch. She thought about that night at Lucia's. About 14 words on the back of a receipt. About the choice she'd made in 30 seconds that had led her here. to this farmhouse, to this life, to this man who was still learning how to be happy. She thought about her mother, who was retired now and came to visit every month. About Miguel, who had graduated with honors and was working at a nonprofit in Sacramento. About the life that had grown from the ruins of that terrible night. The door opened behind her. Marcus stepped onto the porch, 2 glasses of wine in his hands. "Leon's telling stories about the old days," he said, handing her a glass. "Maria seems horrified. It's entertaining. Are you going to be okay?" Hearing all that again, Marcus considered the question. He did that now, took time with his answers, turned them over before letting them go. "Yeah," he said finally, "I think I am." They stood together, watching the last of the sun disappear behind the hills. The air was warm, smelling of cut grass, and the dinner that was almost ready. "You never asked me," Elena said. "Asked you what? Why I did it, that night, why I wrote the note." Marcus turned to look at her. In the fading light, his face was all shadows and planes, unreadable. "I know why," he said. "You do? Because you're you." He set down his wine glass and took her hand. "Because you see people, the real them, underneath everything else. You saw me in that restaurant and you decided I was worth saving, even when I didn't believe it myself. That's not, it is." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. "And every day I try to be worthy of that, of you." Elena felt her eyes sting. Even now, even after 2 years of learning him, he could still catch her off guard. "I love you," she said. "I love you too." From inside the house, Leon called out that dinner was ready. Marcus smiled. That full, unguarded smile she'd come to live for. "Come on," he said. "Let's go home." They walked inside together, into the light and the warmth and the sound of friends laughing, and outside, the stars began to appear. Distant, bright, infinite. Watching over a farmhouse in Oregon, where 2 people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances were building something new. Something worth saving. The Vance Foundation for Second Chances opened its doors 3 years after Elena and Marcus bought the farmhouse. It wasn't a big operation, a converted warehouse in Portland that offered job training, counseling, and transitional housing for people leaving prison. The kind of people Marcus used to be, the kind of people he understood. Elena ran the medical clinic on site. She'd gone back to school, gotten her nurse practitioner license, built something that mattered. Every day she saw people at their lowest, addicts and criminals and broken humans. And every day she remembered what it felt like to see someone else's pain and choose to help anyway. Marcus worked in the back offices, handling finances and logistics. He never talked about his past with the clients, but somehow they knew. Somehow they sensed that he understood their struggles in ways that regular social workers couldn't. Detective Diane Santos visited once a year. She was retired now, living in Arizona, but she always made the trip. "Weirdest career capstone I ever had," she'd told them at the foundation's opening ceremony. "I spent 7 years trying to bring you down, and here I am cutting the ribbon on your nonprofit." "Life is strange," Marcus had agreed. "That it is." She'd looked at him for a long moment. "You know what I figured out? In all those years of chasing you?" "What's that?" "That the law only goes so far. Justice only goes so far. Sometimes the best thing you can hope for is that people change, actually change, not just serve their time and go back to what they were." She'd paused. "You changed." "I had help." Santos had glanced at Elena, who was across the room talking to a donor. "Yeah," she'd said. "I guess you did." On their 5th anniversary, Marcus took Elena back to the beach in Malibu where he'd met Victoria one last time. "Why here?" she'd asked. "Because this is where it started. My second chance." He'd taken her hand. "I wanted to show you something." He'd led her down the sand to the water's edge, where the waves lapped at their feet and the Pacific stretched out to the horizon. "I used to think about dying here," he'd said quietly. "After Victoria, after Thomas, when it felt like everything I'd built was ashes. I'd come here and watch the ocean and think about just walking in, not stopping." Elena's hand had tightened on his. "But I didn't," he'd continued. "Because I kept thinking about 14 words on the back of a receipt, about a woman who could have looked away and didn't, about the possibility, just the possibility, that I could be something other than what I was." He'd turned to face her. "You saved my life that night at the restaurant, but that's not the moment that matters. The moment that matters is every day since, every day you've chosen to stay, to believe in me, to love me even when I didn't deserve it. Marcus. Wait. He'd reached into his pocket. I have something for you. It was a small box. Elena's heart had stopped. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a diamond set in white gold. Nothing ostentatious, just beautiful. I know we've built a life together, Marcus had said. I know we don't need a piece of paper to prove anything, but I want to spend the rest of my life being worthy of you, Elena Vasquez. I want to wake up every morning knowing that I get to try again, with you. Elena had looked at the ring, at the man holding it, at the ocean behind him, vast and ancient and indifferent to their small human drama. Yes, she'd said. They'd gotten married on the farmhouse porch, with Leon as best man and Rosa officiating. Elena's mother had cried through the whole ceremony. Miguel had given a toast that made everyone laugh. And afterward, when the guests had gone and the stars had come out, Elena and Marcus had stood on their porch one more time. So what now? She'd asked. Marcus had smiled, that full smile, the one that still made her heart skip. Now we keep going, he'd said. One day at a time, one choice at a time, one second chance at a time. Elena had leaned into him, breathing in the scent of him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. I can do that, she'd said. And they had. Sometimes the smallest choices have the largest consequences. A waitress overhears something she shouldn't. A man reads 14 words on the back of a receipt. Two lives intersect in a moment of chaos, and nothing is ever the same. This is a story about second chances, about the possibility of change, even for those who seem beyond redemption. It's a story about seeing the person underneath the circumstances, the human beneath the label. Most of all, it's a story about choice. About the 30 seconds we all get sometimes to decide who we want to be. About the 14 words or fewer that can change everything. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe. New stories every day, because everyone deserves a second chance. See you in the next one.